Hello and welcome everyone. I am so glad to receive your presence for today's evening, which celebrates literature, art in all its glory. I extend my warm welcome to all into the third edition of Orange City Literature Festival, organized by SGR Knowledge Foundation in association with GH Raisoni University, powered by Raisoni Institutions. This is your life. Say yes to the things you want in life. Take risks and do what you love. And make sure you do it often. Live your life on your terms. Just like today's topic of the session, The Other Man, A Tale of Being Happy on Your Own Terms by Mr. Farhad J Dadyburjor in conversation with Ms. Ruhi Gilde. I am Aditi Mishra, delighted to be your anchor for today's session. Mr. Farhad sir has been an entertainment and lifestyle journalist for over 20 years. Born and based in Mumbai, India, he has held several senior editorial positions, including at DNA newspaper as launch editor at the international men's magazine FHM and currently at the Leela magazine. His debut novel, How I Got Lucky, was a satire on India's celebrity culture. His new novel, The Other Man, is possibly the first gay rom-com set in modern-day Mumbai to be published internationally. It is funny, endearing, big-hearted book about a young man who is searching for the courage to be himself and love who and what the way he wants. It's an honor to have you with us, Farhad sir, and this gives even more delighted as we have Miss Ruhi Gilde, who will be in conversation with him as the moderator. Miss Ruhi is a writer by profession and a reader at heart. She graduated from Jai Hind College, Mumbai, with a degree in mass media, having worked across verticals in media, including advertising and PR. She founded her calling in writing. She works at a luxury and lifestyle magazine, ideating stories across food, fashion, beauty, and in her spare time, you can find her working on her passion project, a book blog called Read with Ruth. I once again welcome you, ma'am, and I welcome you, sir. Also, before moving ahead, I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the support of Westland Publications. Association is valuable to Orange City Literature Festival. Now, my dear audience, you are about to experience a conversation between two very dynamic individuals. So, without skipping a moment, I humbly invite Ms. Ruhi ma'am to lead us ahead.
Hi, thank you so much, Aditi, for the wonderful introductions. Hello, Farhad, how are you?
Hi, Ruhi. Thanks, Aditi. It's wonderful to be here with everyone. And I can't wait for your volley of questions to come about, Ruhi.
Yes. I'm very well prepared for this. So I would just like to introduce your book. I have it right here. I want people to see this lovely cover. And I wanted to begin with one line that I think encapsulates this book perfectly. And it's the blurb, so of course it does, but I'm just gonna read it out for you. Rich, handsome, and connected. He's a catch for any woman. There's just one other catch. And I really, of course, I love wordplay, so I really love the blurb at the back, Farhad.
Yeah.
But I think it just talks so accurately about the Indian arranged marriage market, rich, handsome,
Yes.
connected. And that's sort of what the book is about, The Other Man. It's about how Ved, a 38-year-old heir to a business empire, he's in the closet and he wants to tell his parents about, about his life and about him being gay, but he doesn't. He is rich, handsome, and
Conflicted,
connected,
yeah.
and so he's afraid about what people will think, and he gets pushed into the arranged market scenario. So yeah, that's what the book is about, and I'm so happy to be speaking with you today. I wanted to dive right into the reason that you've written this book, Farhad. Like, what was
Yeah.
your thought process behind it? If you could just
Yeah.
tell me a bit about that.
Sure, Ruhi. Basically, I'll tell you how this whole book came about. Around 6 to 7 years ago, I met my literary agent who's based in New York. She'd come down for one of, some events out here, and we met up. And the nuts and bolts of the story that I told her about at that time was it's about two men of different ages, different ethnicities, different upbringings who are bound by one thing, which is love. That was really the basis of the book when I spoke to her. She said, it sounds great, it sounds special, go for it. I was in a really demanding job for 3 years. I didn't do anything. I said, yes, I'm writing it, I'm writing it, I'm writing it. I didn't write anything. It was difficult, because you know how it is with journalism. Journalism is demanding, right? It takes a lot out of you. Then to sit down and write a book. But then later on, when I moved out of that place and I started at another place, did I have the time to really concentrate? And then it grew into this book, which was a lot about also the family being involved. Because, the main character, just to give you a brief idea on the listeners, the main character, Wade, is closeted, like you said. He's rich, handsome, connected. He's a lot like the ideal GQ man. We see men like these on magazine covers and we think they have it all. But actually, he's inside riven with unhappiness. He's just broken up with another guy who's gone on to get married. His mother's pushing him into an arranged marriage. It happens all the time, let me tell you, with gay men. I know so many instances of gay men who unfortunately pushed into an arranged marriage, and then things go crazy. And just as that big, huge engagement, the typical shadi that happens out here, the crockery from there and the cutlery from, yeah, exactly, the big fat wedding is coming about. He meets Carlos, who's a much younger, bubbly American visiting Mumbai, and they fall in love. And then it's that the whole book is the crux is that quicksand that he's caught in. Do I have the courage to come out and tell my parents and tell the business community, which is so conservative actually? Will I lose my job? Will my parents throw me out? Will my life be over? It's really tough. It's a tough situation to be in when you're closeted and then you have to deal with it. And on the other hand, he's like, I've found the love of my life. I love this guy. He's doing wonderful things for me. He's making me more empowered. He's making me feel stronger about myself. But then he's got this engagement going. You know what I mean? It's crazy. So it's like this topsy-turvy situation where he's like got one leg here and one leg there, and he doesn't know what to do. And that is why it was really important to bring in the parents in a large aspect, because the support of your parents can really change everything for a gay man or woman. When you have supporting parents, it makes a world of a difference, because I've been in that situation. I came out when I was 28, and I know how difficult it is to be a closeted man, in a city like in Mumbai. But there's several people across India who are in smaller towns who are facing much harder issues. I've heard of so many different stories. So that's why the parents came in a very strong aspect. And of course, it's the best case scenario. So I'll tell you what my most important aspect of this book, Ruhi, was that I wanted it to be a happy, empowering, love-filled book, because for the longest time, I've read these LGBT books, LGBT themed books, which somebody dies, somebody commits suicide, somebody falls ill from sickness, somebody leaves somebody, Call Me By Your Name, Brokeback Mountain, even the movies that have surrounded us for years, have largely been very unhappy. And so I read a lot of that growing up, and I was like, but give me hope. I mean, I'm looking at literature to give me hope, make me feel empowered, That was really a very strong aspect of writing this book. That if you're a gay man and you read this, you will get courage to understand the situation you're in if you're closeted, or if you're in an arranged marriage and that aspect is happening. Or, of course, on the larger scale, it's like a great sort of Bollywood rom-com. There's love, betrayal, this big shadi happening, all sorts of things happening. So it's also got that aspect to it. But it was really important for me personally to see to it that whoever reads it, especially if they're in the same situation as the character, they feel comfort, they feel courage, they feel empowered. And I'm amazed with some of the feedback that I've got about that, which we can talk about also.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important to have something relatable for the LGBTQ it has to be fun and relatable at the same
Yeah.
time. I think
Yeah.
that's something that I definitely felt when I was reading the book. It was it was an easy breezy read. I finished it in, about 2 days. That's only because it was a working day.
I
Otherwise,
know. I know.
it would
So
have been,
it
yeah.
always amazes me when people a lot of people have said this, we finished it overnight and all. And I'm like, guys, it took me 3 years to write this book. So it's always hilarious when I hear this. But I totally understand. It was meant to be a quick read. But
Of
the
course.
main thing was to leave you feeling good by the end of it, to feel empowered, and to also give a ringside view. Ruhi, it's really important to give a ringside view of what does it mean to be gay in India. I've had so many people ask me, friends and stuff like that, like, so, what does it mean to be gay? And I'm like, how many hours do you have? It's so difficult to explain. Now, when they ask me, I'm just
Yeah.
like, read this
Yes.
book.
Now you have it condensed into a 300-page.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's so many issues involved. And it is a tough thing to explain, but it's much easier once it's in a book. And I just felt that like we needed this, like we needed our own Indian gay rom-com, which was positive, which was empowering,
Yeah.
and which will help other people also along the way. I really hope that's like my biggest hope, frankly, from the book.
Joy, yeah, and hope.
Yeah.
Joy and hope, I think that encapsulates the book perfectly. So, Farhad, actually going back to a bit about what you said before, you said it takes people 1 day to read the book, but it took you 3 years to actually write it. So, could you tell me a bit about the writing process?
Yeah. So, like I told you, I was in this demanding job and stuff like that. And I wrote a little bit. I mean, I did write some stuff in those 3 years. I did do some little scribbles and a chapter or two or whatever, but I hadn't got a hold of the book. I then I got a lot of time, and frankly, it was when I joined the Leela magazine. That was when I actually had a lot of time to write, and I started working on it. And I think it took me maybe a year and a half, I think, to do it. But then there's a lot of work post that, right? So then it goes to my agent, she sees it, and then there's lots of back and forth, back and forth. So it took another year and a half with all the back and forth happening, with that also. Uh, the amazing thing, which I have to tell you, in hindsight, and I always feel things work out so beautifully in hindsight when we think about it, is that in 2018, in September, Section 377 was knocked down, and same-sex relationships were decriminalized, which was the biggest, wonderful sort of freedom movement for the gay community, right? For the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
By when that was announced, that I literally remember the day it was announced. It was such a big deal, like there were congratulatory messages, and people on Twitter and Facebook were going crazy, and it was wonderful. I remember calling my agent because by then the book was written, it was with her, everything was set. And I called her and I said, this is what happened. She's like, oh my God, that's wonderful. I can't believe this, because she's in America. She hadn't known by then. So I was updating her. And then I said, you know what, Priya, we just have to include this new India in the book. I said, with this, knocking down of 377, things are going to change. And surely we've seen that, So then we changed an aspect towards the end to bring in this whole, knocking down of 377. We amplified it a lot more in the book. So, he gets these little Twitter alerts about 377 happening, or, this one said this, and these debates on TV are going on. And, it was something that really was like a rainbow, for the LGBT community, because that 377 was actually in place in 1861. I mean, can you imagine how many years we've lived with this? Because it was a remnant of the British when the British ruled India, and they left, but we never removed that till now, till 2018, which is like 3 years ago. So it was a huge burst of joy. And I was like, that has to be part of the book. That's so important. So then we included a lot more on that aspect. And wonderfully, I'm so happy that like I took those 3 years of not doing any work and the book got delayed, because otherwise I would have missed that. I would have missed that event completely if the book had been ready.
It was meant to be. Yeah.
Yeah. It really was. It just really worked out fantastically when I think about it, in retrospect. Because that's a big thing, 377 had luckily for me, I've been fortunate to not have any implications from that, but I've known of people who've been harassed, or you read about it in the newspaper, or there have been lots of incidences, which have made it difficult, especially for a lot of closeted men, who may have met somebody. You read about in the paper always these sordid stories of somebody being blackmailed for asking sexual favors of another man. That's what you read. It was never something positive. Now you read a lot more positive queer stories in the newspapers or magazines.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to know is, since this book came out post Section 377 being knocked down, and your previous book, which was a satire, but also about the queer community, have you seen a sort of difference in the response from people in these two books?
Well, I'd say there's been a huge change in terms of how one can even promote a book today. When my first book came about, which was around 8 years ago, and it was a coming of age story of this journalist, in the world of media and fashion and all that sort of stuff happening, like this crazy sort of satire. We didn't have Instagram, we had Twitter and we had Facebook, which
That's so strange to think
about. Exactly. We didn't have these meetings, right? Nobody had thought of Zoom or WebEx or anything at that time. Today, all of this goes on, which is so, again, in hindsight, when you look at it, it's all come from the pandemic, but it's continuing, right? Post the pandemic, also, we're doing so many Zoom meetings. It's continuing. That was never there earlier. Nobody even thought about it. So today, there's a lot more in terms of being able to promote your book to the right audience. And the difference, Ruhi, was that with my first book, it was an India published book. It was published in India. My second book is an international book. And there's a huge difference, because this book has been showered with love by people from America, across the world, literally since the end of April. Because, for them, it's completely different. It's like a book based, firstly, on Mumbai, which they don't know a lot about. A lot of people think, a lot of people think India is very exotic. It's about godmen and snake charmers and things like that. But I was like, I wanted to show Mumbai with its pulsing, throbbing energy. We've got Bollywood stars here. We've got politicians. We've got some of the richest people in the world living here. Health food cafes and, all these trendy hipsters sitting, sipping Starbucks and stuff like that.
Being from Mumbai myself, I mean, I could imagine the places that you described. You talk about Malabar Hill and Pali, and I can see all of it, being infused into the book, and the essence of Mumbai really coming across. And the fact, I think, that you have an international character in it, Carlos, who is from the US, is definitely makes it relatable to the international audience as well.
So and that was part of it, that was like, I would say, the city of Mumbai is a character in this book. You know what I mean? It's a character on its own. It is a very Mumbai book, because these are places I've gone to. Toto's Garage Pub is a really popular pub. Whether it's Pali, like you were saying, set in Bandra, or whether it's Sea Lounge at the Taj Hotel, the Gateway of India. I mean, these were all iconic spots that I needed to bring in, and so the idea is also that for an international audience, it just gives them an idea of what is the city really like. They've been seeing too much of the exotic stuff, those black and white images of a cow near a Mercedes or something like that. And I was like, no. Mumbai is like a throbbing, pulsing city.
Yes. And speaking of, you said it's like character in the book. So speaking of characters, what for you has been, the hardest character to write in this book?
Yeah, that's a tough one, I would say the girl that he's going to marry, Disha, who he's getting into an arranged marriage with. And very ironically, although he knows he's closeted and he's gay, and he's starting this affair with Carlos on the side, he also develops this wonderful friendship with this girl, because he doesn't have a lot of friends. He's a pretty lonely guy. He's this huge industrialist, and he's got everything that way: money, fame, power. But he's not got a lot of friends at all. And so she becomes a really important part of his life, even though he knows he's lying to her. Like, he feels so crappy lying to her all the time, but he knows he has to do it. But it was very important for me to get that dynamic right, between Ved and Disha. So the reader understands that he wasn't in any way using her. He was just trying his best to struggle with his situation. He hints at it often, and sometimes he even feels that conversation is going to come about where she's going to say, listen, because he feels that she knows that there's no physical attraction between them like it normally would be in a couple, right? And there have been those instances and stuff like that.
Yes.
But and unfortunately, that's the sad thing in reality also. A lot of, until you really say it up front, I think you put a board on your head saying I'm gay, people don't get it.
Because it's not it's an assumption that you're not. That is the first assumption, is that you're heterosexual. Right?
Exactly. And I wonder why that should be the case. Like, why is that assumption so strong? And sometimes even when you drop hints or you say stuff like, I tell you, like when I was in college and a lot of my friends thought that, I might be gay, they felt sort of like it might offend me if they asked. And I agree with them. Yeah, I agree with them because that time I was closeted, So if you're closeted, it does become. So in some sense, I understand that dynamic to show that, what, he really loves this girl in every way except physically. She's a great friend. She means so much in his life. But at the same time, he's in a certain sense, he has to lie to her and sort of play along because he's not living his best life, right? He's a closeted gay man and he's trying to figure things out. And that dynamic was really important to get right, to get her also as a character right, was important for me. And in fact, my agent, I kept asking her, because being a woman, I was like, have I got that right? Because the other characters I'd seen a lot. So, Wade, a little bit is based on me in some sense, being closeted and that sort of thing. Carlos, I've seen people like Carlos. The parents, I've seen the father and the mother. But Disha was really sort of like a complete invention in that way, you know, to sort of bring out that. And that was, I was constantly checking that, have I got this right? Am I, not being too biased or weird about it and stuff like that. So that was a tricky space, but I think we managed it well.
Yes, I think definitely. I think Disha was quite a relatable character in the sense of, she was also weighed down by her parents' expectations, and the whole gender bias of it also came to the forefront in it as well. I think she was one of, actually, I think some of my favorite characters in the book were also the parents. I loved the father's character as well, and the mother. It's also, I can imagine these people in real life. I can imagine his parents actually being like this. So, but they are actually a very important part of the book. So, as you mentioned, parental acceptance.
It's huge. Parental acceptance is huge. I mean, you hear of awful stories. So I've heard of terrible stories of where people have been thrown out of their homes or been physically, also been hit or sent to psychiatrists. Very often that's a very common thing. Parents will say, go see a psychiatrist. I think things are changing now. Things are much better in the last couple of years, but earlier that was a very common scenario, and at the same time, I have seen some wonderfully supportive parents. I've really seen some people who, it's amazing, and it gives you so much of sort of just inner courage and joy when you see that. You just feel so good about it. It's so hard to explain, but it just gives a lot of courage. You just feel like, yes, they get it. They really understand in some sense. So that was important. Yeah. Even the father, that's why I hinted at it, but I didn't really say it outright. The father had gone to Oxford. And so he let us, he might have had like a bohemian life out there, but I didn't get into it. And I think that's why he's sort of more open and sort of understanding, but yet being a businessman in India, he has to put on that front of being, the boss and a little serious and the distance and stuff. But I think he's a very liberal-minded guy, actually, in his mind because of his experience in Oxford. But I didn't get into too much about it. I just let it be to the reader to figure out, But he was, I mean, he was great. The parents were great, actually.
Definitely. Yeah, that was great. I mean, I think he sort of knew, and he was trying to get Ved out of his shell to kind of tell him, but he didn't want to ask. But I think that was a nice touch there, where he was like understanding before Ved even mentioned anything.
Yeah, I think he was like sort of hinting, and he was waiting for Wade to sort of, have some sort of conversation with him.
Yes.
But, I tell you something, it's so difficult, honestly, like, people don't understand how tough a situation you're in when you're closeted. The amount of turmoil you feel inside, um, you just don't, you feel you lead half a life. That's what it really is. You're not leading a full life, you know. That's the unfortunate thing. And what I've realized from my own experience, that at the end of the day, when you come out, you do it for yourself. So you can lead your best life. It's not for anybody else. You're not doing it for your parents. You're not doing it for your siblings. You're not doing it for your friends. You're doing it for yourself so you can feel empowered. You can lead your best life. Because see, if you're closeted, it affects everything, right? It affects your personal life. It affects your career. It affects your relationship with friends. It affects your love life also, right? Everything gets into the mix. And so that's
Yes.
tough, That's why there's been a lot of talk with corporates about LGBTQ inclusion, because that helps them get the best out of their own employees. If their employees are out and supported, then that gives them the best work also, right? They also feel they love the company for that, because they feel they,
Yes,
yeah,
definitely. That's a huge part of it. And do you think your personal experiences have somehow, of course, you do tend to put yourself in a book when you write it, and some part of you is in that book, but has it been influenced by your real life experiences? If you could tell
definitely,
us about
definitely. Um, but again, it's unconscious. It's something that even with the first book was very, very much part of my life. It was my view of journalism and what I'd seen and stuff like that. With this book, definitely it came in terms of how difficult it is to be closeted, parts of what the city are like, the hypocrisies, the discrimination that exists, even a lot of elements related to the gay world. You know, what I've always felt is that sure, we've had other gay novels also that are there, which might have been tragic, which is fine. Those are legitimate stories also, but they've never really the gay world has a language of its own. Cruising, top and bottom. These are certain terms in the gay world that only, like, if you don't know about it as an outsider, you're not going to get it. You know what I
No,
mean?
I didn't. You had explained it in like a line there, so
Yeah,
that's how I
exactly.
understood it. Because as someone, in fact, as someone who's not really read that much queer literature, I didn't understand like the slang words or certain intricacies that I did not understand. So it's great to be educated about these things, to know about these things, and
Yeah,
yeah, I
because it
really
has a
like.
language. It really has a language of its own, Ruhi. It's something that that's why you have to explain. And I felt this is the best way to let people know at one shot, you know, what does it mean, when you're talking about cruising, or even like when you're chatting, what is it like to chat on the apps? Though, of course, everybody who's chatted on apps knows, sometimes you'll get an image of a person who looks great, and then when you meet them, they're like a gorilla or something. You're just like, whatever, you know.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
those things are very typical, But I just wanted to bring out a lot of the sort of, how do I say, the life of a gay man. What is it like, the loneliness in some sense that also comes with it, because he's pretty, like, he just puts himself in his work, right? I mean, that's how it really starts off. Also, he's just absorbed in his work because he doesn't have anything else. you know his personal life is zero. So that's really what happens. People just push themselves into their job, which is really unhealthy, frankly. And then just the whole thing of getting messages about something that's happening somewhere, or these alerts on Grinder. What is Grinder like? A lot of friends have asked me, like, what is Grinder like? I'm like, it's just like Tinder. It's the same thing. It's just that it's for men. It's the same thing. So a lot of those aspects, also a little bit about like things that older gay men might have faced in the city, and how difficult it would have been for them, because before the apps, how do you meet somebody, right? It was impossible. Like, even when I was in college, I couldn't meet another gay man. I mean, how do you do it? There was no internet. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, of course, it was taboo for in most.
Yeah, it was so much harder. you know it was it was really like you led this life which is like a symphony of loneliness. You're just on your own basically, and if you're closeted, that's even worse because you're constantly questioning yourself. Like the questions he constantly has were really the questions I always had in my head. On one hand, you're like, oh, I want to do this. On the other hand, you're like, oh my God, but if I do this, then what? Will my parents not talk to me, or will I have a problem with my job, or what about my future? What's my future gonna be? Like, I think for a lot of parents, what's really important is knowing that their child will be cared for in some way. That's what's really important for them. That's why the arranged marriage is such a big thing, right? They want their child, they want the kids, they want the grandkids, and they want their
Settled.
child. Yeah, settled. Exactly.
That's the key word that's always being
Yeah.
used.
I'm sure I'm sure from your own experience, you also know how it is, right? With the pressure of marriage coming in, by which age you should do it, and the whole thing of it's about time. You can't, how long can you be single? I mean, it's
There's a
women
long way
also.
to go for me, but
Yeah.
yes, I understand.
You're making that certain.
Yes. That's out there. No one is questioning me as of now.
Yeah. But I mean, so that whole bit, so like he's 38, right? 38 is a pretty high age for a guy.
That's past the
Long
you know,
past. Yeah.
the 30 benchmark, past the 35 benchmark as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And the thing is, like he thought that he would, when he says yes to his mother for an arranged marriage, he thought I'd say yes now to just keep her happy and get on with life. And then somehow I'd make an excuse and get out of it. But he gets so caught in that quicksand, because the mother goes full force. She's like planning this huge engagement and calling it.
Running with it. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, like you mentioned, I think, and that's, I've read some reviews and everything, and people are a bit, the Ved's indecision has, that's a point that I feel like some people have brought up. So
struggling with, yeah.
He's like lying to Tisha, his fiance, and so readers have kind of pointed that out. So what do you have to say about that? Like,
well, that's really, that it is what it is. That is really how you lead a life. See, that's the whole thing about when you're closeted, right? You lead a life of lies, and the biggest lie is to yourself all the time, right? Because you're constantly lying to yourself, and you're trying to pretend that you're a heterosexual man. You're trying to pretend, sure, I'll be fine. Like, just to give you a really, really crazy analogy, I was a couple of years talking to somebody who was in a similar situation like this young guy. He's 28, doing very well for himself, at the top of his career. And he was like, in 2 years, my dad wants me to get married. And I'm like, but how are you going to get married? Like, you're gay. And he was very closeted. He hadn't come out at all. So he was like, yeah, but, and then he gave me this crazy analogy. And he said, Fad, I never liked dogs. And my best friend got a dog. And then I got used to the dog. So I'll get used to my wife. And that's how men think. They think it's something to get used to. They don't realize the implications that will come out of that. You can't force love that way. You can't fake it, beyond a point. There are couples for years.
Yeah, if you think about it, that's not fair to anyone in the relationship. Not
at all. Yeah, and the biggest betrayal is to yourself, right? Because you're just lying to yourself all the time. You're lying to this poor woman who thinks she's in this wonderful marriage. You're lying to your parents, and you're lying to yourself, and then nobody's happy at the end of the day, because the wife always senses, and I've known of couples where I can see the wife has sensed that, yes, her husband is gay, but she's not got a confirmation about it. She doesn't know what to do about it because she doesn't know, right? So she's stuck in that situation, and neither is he really happy, because he can't find true love either, right? I mean, he's just living this lie. So you can have one night stands on the side, and which is what they do, right? They go abroad and have one night stands, or they'll get onto Grindr and have one. But how long can you do that? You know what I mean? It's not going to fulfill your soul, right? You need love. Like, everybody needs love in this life. And that was also, like I said, like celebrating love, celebrating gay love was so important with this book. Because I was like, you know what? Let people get it that, two men can have the most wonderful relationship, the most love-filled relationship, and they need to read it. We need to see more of it. We need to read more of it.
So, what kind of feedback have you received for the book? Especially, like, have you had people from the LGBTQ community reach out to you and
Oh God, lots. And with Instagram, it's just never ending. But I've got a lot. So I got a wonderful message initially from this guy from Poland, actually, this gay man from Poland, young guy. And he said in Poland, a lot of cities are considered LGBTQ free zones, in the sense it's beyond even criminal. You know what I mean? They just don't even acknowledge it. So it's really a bad situation. So he is building a queer library, just books of queer literature, so people can remember, and those who are interested in it can read it. So he reached out to me for a copy for that, and he said, I'm just building this library of just queer novels for the community here, so they feel better and they realize. And then, so that was wonderful. Then I got a lot of other messages of people saying, we love this aspect, we love that aspect, things like that. But one message in particular really stayed with me was somebody from America found me on Facebook somehow and posted this message saying that I've read this book. It was unputdownable. Again, I read it overnight. Everybody's read this really quick. And he said, I found it unputdownable. He said, the whole aspect of coming out as a gay man, I relate to so much because it's so realistic to what it's like. And then he said something really, really important. He said that I'm planning to give this out actually as a gift for the holidays, for Christmas, during Christmas time, to my friends. And he's like, I hope this book, even if it saves one life, that'll mean everything. And that is something that we need to talk about more, the responsibility of queer literature. Because so many people who can't come out, who are in these bad situations, unfortunately kill themselves. You read about it in the papers also, it's a horrible situation to be in, and it's mentally draining. It just wipes you out, because it's literally like carrying like 1,000 bricks on your shoulder. It's literally like that. Every day you just go around with that, and you don't know how to get it off your shoulder because you're caught in that situation. Then you keep lying that, everything's fine in my life, and it's not, So that really touched me, because I was like, that is really the most important thing. If it gives somebody strength, if it gives somebody power, if it even gives you comfort for 1 hour, I'll be happy. I just wanted to make other gay men realize that, you're not alone. This is a situation that exists. It is a difficult situation in it. But if you get the courage and realize that you can lead your best life, you can lead such a magical, happy life, just make that one decision, put all your strength together and get out. Come out to your parents, or come out, to whoever you can. Usually you come out to your friends first. That's the usual thing. You get the support of your friends because they're the most understanding. Hopefully. And they've anyways figured, right? Somewhere they figured.
Then you need to cut them out of your life if they're not accepting,
Completely. I'll tell you something. When I came out, I actually changed, my whole world changed, in the sense that I did actually, you don't cut them out. You just automatically can't relate to so many people that you were relating to because you were pretending to be somebody else. You know what I mean? And if they don't get it, so I'll tell you a really funny experience. When I was in DNA newspaper and I attended a gay Bombay party, which were really popular, which are still popular in Bombay. And I'd gone for it, and it was the first time somebody had written about it as a journalist. So I wrote about it, a small piece in the paper. Suddenly, a friend of mine from Facebook contacts me and says, I read your story today, but what were you doing there? I'm like, duh, what do you think I was doing there? Like, I didn't go there for the cocktails. Like, hello. So, you know what I mean? It's so strange, but even amongst friends that, because see, in college, if you've not told them, or in some sense, they've never, you've not told them about it, or they've not got it still, right? Because there was a lack of education for a long time. Today, with the internet, there's a lot more. But a lot of people who've seen you in college may not really get it because they're viewing you just how you view people from school in that school mold.
Yes,
you still think of them, as that person.
That person, yes. It's a defined image in your head that is not open to change.
Yeah. I'll tell you, talking about school thing, another really funny incident comes to mind. So in school, I was teased with this one girl, okay? And in school, I didn't really know whether I was gay or what. It was just something. So I was like, okay, whatever. We were teased a lot and all of that. Cut to years later, I suddenly bump into her at a gay party. She'd gone to America. She was down visiting Mumbai. I bump into her at a gay party. I'm like, hi, what are you doing here? And she's like, hi, what are you doing here? And I'm like, surprise, you know. And it was so funny because, you know, it was so strange for her. I could understand it because in school, she was sort of teased with me, you know. We were always considered a couple and everybody say, oh, those two. Although nothing happened between us, we never were. But you know what I mean? It is difficult. I understand for some people who viewed you in a certain way. And that's why parents also view you in a certain way, right? You have to explain to them and talk to them. And it takes that whole process.
Yeah.
You know, for them to understand also, it takes time. You need to be able to talk to them properly and they need to view your life also that way. You know, they need to see you with somebody that you love and then they get an understanding that, yes, it's the same thing as anybody else. But I mean, so some of these experiences have been crazy and you know, I totally get why that girl was like completely shocked. Like she come with friends and we just bumped into each other, you know. And but she got it, you know, and post that, I mean, I think people get it and then they're fine. But
Yeah.
today it's a lot better. You know, when I was in college in the 90s, it was a crazy situation, you know. There was no information really available. Gay men were always considered punchlines or people to laugh at in movies and plays. There was a lot of ridicule associated with it.
Yeah.
You know, and there was no information, right? Even
Exaggeration
yeah,
of certain characteristics, and it's just a
yeah,
lot of misinformation, basically.
exactly. And there was no way to get that. So I used to reach out to literature to understand myself better. Even I needed to understand myself, right? How do I get an understanding? So otherwise, a lot
Yeah.
of people go abroad. Like, you know, a lot of gay men, like friends from school who later came out as gay, they all went abroad to discover themselves because it's easier that way, right? Then you go into a more liberal atmosphere and stuff like that. But for me, I reached out to literature, but then I kept reading beautifully written books, but they were all tragedies. I was like, what the hell? I mean, I'm leading a happy life. Like, why is everybody talking about somebody, you know, dying or always being
Like,
left
you want
without hope?
hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you had to recommend, a couple books to, it can even be like people who are in the closet, or even just anyone who wants to read queer literature, which books would you sort of recommend for people starting out in this,
Yeah.
genre?
So, you know, the thing is, I have read a lot of these tragedies, which are really great, well written books. So, even Ruhi, just to give you an understanding, even internationally, gay rom-coms or trans rom-coms or whatever have only started coming about since the last 2 3 years. These happier gay novels, even internationally, it's always been tragic. That's the whole thing. I mean, I don't know why that was the case, but that was the case. You know, publishers wanted this heart-wrenching book if you're gay. You know what I mean? You had to leave the reader really sort of cut up by the end of it. Now
Yeah.
that's changed. Now they're happy if you leave the reader with a smile, you know, and feeling good. So the books I've read have also been pretty, but I remember one really lovely short collection of gay um, short stories by an Indian author called Rahul Mehta, which came out years ago, 15 years ago, practically. He's an American Indian called Quarantine. Ironical for the times we live in, but at that time he'd written this book called Quarantine.
Hmm.
And I was one of the few Indian journalists to interview him. And it always annoyed me. I was like, why don't others like this book? It's such a great book. But at that time, you know what, even in the media, there wasn't, unless there wasn't that thing of, you know, doing a lot of LGBT as it is today, you know. So it just missed the boat in a lot of other places, but it was a great book. Then of course there are brilliant authors like Alan Hollinghurst, he won the first gay Booker novel. You know, it was the first gay novel to win the Booker Prize in something like, I think, 36 years of the Booker history, or 34 years. You know what I mean? So you can imagine how recent that's actually all been, you know.
Yeah.
So he won that for The Line of Beauty. That was great. He's written a lot of great books that have been wonderful. I just read this book by Garth Greenwell called Cleanness, which is again short stories. which are really great. It's possibly one of the best reviewed books of last year. But there is tragedy in all these books, let me tell you that. I mean, these are not, there's some stories that might be happy, but by and large, these books have all, and I think in literary fiction, there is always going to be tragedy when it comes to these stories. I think in commercial fiction, you have the freedom to make them much happier, or in the YA space, young adult space. That is where we're seeing a lot. We're seeing queer fantasy, we're seeing queer horror, we're seeing bi horror. That is changing.
Yeah, and I think coming of age is something that definitely needs happier endings, because the people reading them are people that need hope, that need direction, that need guidance, that need to see relatable stories.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually the first, the Other Man has been the second LGBTQ romance that I have read. The first one was Red, White, and Royal Blue, which received also great reviews. Again, happy ending. Why?
Exactly. And you know what? I really feel we need a bulk of those. Even we're starting to see that even out here. We are starting to see even Indian happier queer novels coming out. I think publishers have picked up on that.
Yeah. So that's great to hear. And I'm adding all of these to my to read list on Goodreads.
I can give you a lot more, but a lot of them are very tragic. I mean, there is a wonderful, wonderful book. Okay, it's one of my most special books that I've read, called A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. It was part of the Booker list around 3-4 years ago. And I read it in this craze. It's a sort of book that you can't put down, but it is such a brutal, difficult book to read, in the sense that I don't think there's anybody who's read it and not cried, And I mean those ugly cries, not cries of happiness, those ugly, because it is such, on one hand, there is a lot of friendship, there's a lot of love, but on the other hand, there's a lot of abuse, but it's a very special book. And the strange thing is, across the world, it's a huge success. Okay, it's one of the most successful books written. Across the world, everyone's always conflicted. People hate it, people love it, people don't know what to make of it. Like, I don't know what to make of it. Like, I love to hate it. It's like that. I love it. It's a very special book. It's beautifully written. It's 800 pages, so it's fat. It really takes you in.
It's on my
list. It's amazing. Check it out.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the last questions that I have is, so if an aspiring writer was to manage a full-time job, how did you go about that? Like, how would you recommend aspiring writers manage their full-time job and writing and everything at the same time?
Yeah, see, something that I was told right from the beginning with my first book is, don't ever leave your day job. You know what I mean? As an author, don't, because you don't know what's going to come out of it. I've had a lot of people actually also reach out to me for advice on writing. Should we get an agent? How should we go about it? And what I would say the most important thing is, forget about all the fact of, do you have to have a launch and how you promote the book. If you want to write a book, get down to writing that book. Start the first sentence. Don't keep talking to people and say, I have this idea in my head, and what do you think? Don't take other people's opinion beyond a point. Because everybody will tell you, nice, but I don't like this. Why don't you change it? Don't. If you want to write a book, sit down, write the first sentence, and the book will flow from there. Write it. If you want to get an agent, you can look for agents, or you can just today send it out to publishers online. They ask for a couple of pages and stuff, like different demarcation, and you'll get feedback from them also. But I would say the most important thing is write your book. Forget everything else. People get very worried that, nobody will read it, or what genre is it going to be? I'm like, forget it. Who cares what genre it is? Write the book. Then we'll tell you what genre it is. Those are all marketing things. Those are things that come in on the marketing stage. That is what your publishing house will settle for you. You don't have to worry about that. If you have an idea in your head, flesh it out. Start with writing a synopsis. A 300-word synopsis of what is your book about, and then just write your book. You don't need to tell anybody about it, or you can tell whoever you want, but just do it and write it to the best of your abilities, and then send it out to publishers. See, there are 3 steps. One is writing the book. Second is getting a publisher on board. And third is the marketing and promotion of the book. So if you don't do one and you keep worrying about three, you're never, and I've seen that so often. People keep asking me, but I don't know any celebrities who will launch my book. I'm like, well, first write the book. Forget about which celebrity you need. You know what I mean? People will love your book if it's a good book, if they relate to it. My point is, even if 2 people like your book, you're successful. If 2 people love your book, you made some difference with 2 people also. It doesn't have to be about, people get very caught up in all these things like, who will read it. People will read your book. You don't worry about who your readers are going to be. They will. Just first write that book, put it down, work out the chapters, rework on it, take whatever time you need, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. There's no time limit. It's like a marriage, right? It's like love. There's no time limit on that. You can find love at 70 also. Yeah, exactly. But, it for me became like a pet project. It was something that I wanted to come back to every day and do. It was always on my mind. It has to consume you in some sense, so you need to figure out, if all of us have jobs, right? And you need to figure out that balance, that maybe you keep only the weekends for this, or you keep 2 hours every day at night for it. You need to figure out your balance of how you'd work on it. But whatever you do it. Like, my point is, don't keep procrastinating and don't keep talking to people. Because I find people keep talking to everyone saying, I've got this idea. But I'm like, guys, put the idea down. We want to read it. Give us the book.
We always need more books. There's never going to be enough books in this world.
Yeah, completely. And on so many diverse subjects, right? On so many things. So I would say that's the best advice for anybody. Just write your book and then see, then you'll get your feedback.
So what can we expect next from you?
Oh my God. I'm honestly, I have not given it too much thought. I feel there is the space for a sequel to this book. I feel the love story between Wade and Carlos could be taken forward in another direction, and a lot, but I've not given it a lot of thought, because you know what, with my first book, being the first book, I was always tense. Some review would come out and I would be like, oh my God, have they loved it or not loved it? Or somebody write on Goodreads or Amazon, I'm like, oh my God, what did they write? I never got a chance to enjoy the success of the book. I was always running around. I was running around to organize the event, or what people had written, or what people were saying. And it was only 6 months later, after everything was over, that I was like, okay, I could take a sigh of breath. And I'm like, okay, the book is gone now. You know what I mean? It's done. So with this book, that I was very clear that I'm going to just enjoy every conversation I have like this, every interview, every review. And I'm not going to worry about what I need to do next, or what. I'm just going to enjoy that moment with the book, and then later see. But yeah, maybe a sequel. I don't know. I really haven't given it too much thought. I've just left it open.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that sounds like the best way to go about it. I mean, we enjoyed every moment of reading your book. So hopefully you're enjoying every moment of the appreciation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Farhad. It's been absolutely great speaking with you, and I have thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. I love books that allow me to escape into another world, but at the same time, give me joy and learning about new things. So it's been an amazing experience.
Thanks, Ruhi. Honestly, without book lovers, authors wouldn't have a career. So we really need book lovers. We need people who appreciate books. So thanks for doing this interview. Thanks for your questions, which were really incisive and wonderful. I mean, it was a lovely chat. It was really nice to just chat about this. And thanks, Aditi, for everything, your introduction and all of it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aditi.
Thank you, Farhad, sir. But yes, Ruhi ma'am, I totally agree with you. I too enjoyed the session. And Farhad sir and Ruhi ma'am for joining us today. We wish we get to hear you both again and be equally enlightened as we all are today. And for my dear massive audience, I am sure that after witnessing this conversation, you all are taking home an enriched version of yourself, just as I will. Thank you for joining us today. Until I see you again, this is Aditi Mishra signing off.
by Sony Group. A vision beyond.